There's a mistake that you are most likely making as a first-time author, because I was guilty of it too. First time you write your book, you're going to feel not as confident as you are when you're finishing, say, your 5th or 6th book. You know, each book that we write and publish, like, it just happens regardless of reviews or book sales. Your confidence does grow and you get more comfortable and you slowly start to find your own writing style. It's been brought to my attention that my writing style, I like to use a lot of metaphors and analogies. And I'm so happy about that because I guess the way that I'm writing it and weaving it into my plot and the story and the paragraphs, that a lot of the reviews are saying like similar things, like, oh, this sounds poetic, it sounds lyrical, etc. And I just find that like the highest honor. But when I look back at my first book, Ashes to Ashes, I mean, this was my first book, and if I could go back and rewrite it, the plot wouldn't be different, but the way that I express those characters' feelings would 100% be different, because I've written so many books in between that, and now I feel very self-assured in my writing style. I'm writing things in scenes that I would not have dipped my toes in before because I was scared of the frigid or hot water. And another one of my readers said it again when they were arc reading Ink Deep Devotion. They always point out to me my metaphors and how, I guess, you know, like we never are walking fully in a character's shoes. We read like fantasy books or say a dark romance or something. Our characters go through situations that personally we've never gone through. But I think it's important to write those situations in a way that the reader can relate, because we want them to be able to relate and feel some empathy towards the characters, because that's what's going to make our book be good to them. So when I'm describing a situation or a scene or these inner emotions, now I don't even have to think about it. When I'm writing it, those metaphors just come through. But of course, when I was writing my first book, like, you know, for instance, you'd say, oh, he was just as hard as stone. That's something easy. It's the first thing that comes to your head. And I feel like this is a mistake we make as first-time authors. When you're going back and re-editing, look at some of those metaphors or look at those comparisons. You're comparing his personality as hard or prickly as a pear, you know what I mean? When those jump out to you, stop and then try to think, let's go beyond. What is the next step? What's the next comparison? What is something else that's hard? I don't know, a turtle shell. Maybe he's as hard as a tortoise shell, but you want to find his soft underbelly. You want to find a way to invoke your revenge. And here's another example. Instead of saying his eyes or her eyes were as hot as fire, what's hotter than, not necessarily hotter than fire, but what's something else that we can compare it to that isn't going to be the same comparison in a million other books? It's going to be something that's going to make your reader think, oh wow, that's a different way to relate to it, and I really like that, and it's refreshing. His eyes burned into as hot as a comet, you know, burning through the sky, and it just made you stop in your tracks. You know, I don't know. So I feel like little tip is, when you're writing, don't necessarily stop writing. Maybe you say, you know, he was cold and full of malice. That's fine. But when you go back for your editing process, just try to push it a little bit more. You know, I feel like I have read so many books that always use, like, compare it to the same thing. You know, his heart was as cold as stone. What else is cold? What is something that is so cold that it's almost like you just can't think about it? My first thought, when I paused the video for a second, was you could say his heart was as frigid and barren as a long forgotten planet. You could see it, but you could never travel to it or breach its perimeters. I don't know. Just like, you do you, but I feel like one mistake that we do as first-time authors is we stay very comfortable in our writing, and we stay a little closed off because we are a little timid. But you're releasing your first book, so just like release it with a bang. Trust me, the bang that you release in your first book is going to be worlds different than when you write like your even second book or 5th or 6th. It's just gonna be different, and your writing's going to keep evolving. If I could go back and tell myself when I was writing Ashes to Ashes, like, just push things a little bit more. And it might not happen the first time you're doing your first edit. It might be the 5th time you're doing your edit. And the more you push it and the more you kind of have to train it like a muscle. Because like I said, when I was writing Ashes to Ashes, I had those natural metaphors come to mind. But now that I'm writing Ink Deep Devotion, you guys, I don't know where they come from. They just pop in my head. For example, what I mean they popped in my head, this metaphor I used when I was writing a scene, and I adored it so much that I worked it into my blurb. And it is when I first met Mila, she fell for me as effortlessly as a jellyfish surrenders to the current. They don't fight it, they can't. I was a shark, I schooled Mila, I taught her how to bend and flow, blah, 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 blah. But when I was writing that, like it just came, like the jellyfish into the current, and they have no control because they don't have the ability to say, I want to turn left or right. They're completely stuck and trapped in their world. That was the first thing that popped into my head. I can't imagine that popping into my head when I was writing my first book, Ashes to Ashes. So it really is like a muscle that you do have to work. And I feel like I've worked it, and I can't wait to see what it's gonna look like 10 books down the line from now. To give you guys more of an example, like if I was writing my first book and I wanted to show that she was trapped or caged, what's the first thing you usually read in a book? She's trapped like a bird in a cage. How many times have you read a book? And I'm guilty of saying a bird in a cage because it's something we can all visually relate to. But just make it a little different for your readers. Give them a new spice to experience. I would pause the video again just to give you guys a few more examples that I really loved that are in my upcoming book, Ink Deep Devotion. So for all my fashion gurus out there, this one is for you. I felt like I was at Hermes begging for a Birkin only to be handed a Pinkerton. No, not everyone is gonna understand that metaphor, but if you do, then you're gonna know exactly how disappointed that character feels. Also, don't feel like you have to take it too far. You can use something simple, like I did here. I was, putting her emotions to a rubber band. But instead of saying like I felt stretched like a rubber band, or I was stretched so far I snapped, what else ruins rubber? Frigid cold temperature. So I said I felt like a rubber band being stretched, blah, 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 blah. You know what the cold does to rubber? It crumbles it. So that was him like being so cold to her slowly over time. She was breaking. So you can use something that's really simple like a rubber band, but instead of saying what every other book will say, like I was stretched so far, I snapped, think of another way that you could destroy or extort this item to mend to that character's emotions. And another thing that I used in my upcoming book that I really loved was I was comparing their relationship to stars, but not in the way that most books will compare it to. We say, oh, our love is like a star and it's shining bright in the darkness. But the cold, hard truth is that a lot of the stars and a lot of the light that we see, it's not even there anymore. It takes, thousands and thousands of years for a star's light to reach us. So I wanted the reader to see that point of view from the starlight. I didn't want them to see the light of their very dark relationship as something that was hopeful. So I said, want to know the truth about stars? We're just remnants of anger and forgotten battles. So in my mind, I was envisioning a star that in its time, it's dead, it's not even there, but that light, it's just traveling to us here on Earth. Most of what you see does not exist anymore. The presence of light in your eyes takes time to fade, and once it does, you realize the star is nothing more than a distant dead object, a remnant of what once was. And that was describing what their relationship was, because we're at the point in the book where things are not good and hopeful. Like doing these metaphors or analogies or whatnot, it's something that is part of my writing style, and it makes my writing style unique to me. So it might not evolve into metaphors, it might be like your descriptions of something else, but just kind of try to push it and make it not be the same thing that the readers are reading in every single book. That's my little word of wisdom today for all my authors out there. Just remember to push yourself a little bit more. And I know that's very hard to do because you're already pushing yourself and being so brave to sit down and write this story that's in your head onto the paper. And that's already like a scary thing, and you're questioning like your sanity at times. But just like in that editing process, just try to push it a little bit more because I really think it will pay off.